There will be time for questions at the end. So tonight, we're honoured to have Vanley Burke with us. His historical documentation of lives of the Black community, part of the Windrush generation and their families, here in Hansworth, Birmingham, is unique. In October 2019, Vanley was the Arts Council's Artist of the Month, and they celebrated his photographs taken as he was living in his community at an exhibition in Colchester at the end of 2019 and the beginning of 2020. It was part of their National Partner Programme. His photographs have been shown in art galleries all over our country and local community places, also in the USA, in China, in South Africa and Mali. So tonight we're in for a treat with his presentation. So welcome, Vanley.
Well, thank you.
Over to you.
Thank you. Can you share screen? Allow me to share screen, please. It's disabled.
I'm going to mute myself now.
Okay. I dare say you can all see this. Okay. Yeah. So thanks for inviting me, John. There was so much that I could talk about. I decided I would stick to a well-tried and tested set of photographs which were exhibited previously at the MAC in Birmingham. The curator was Linda Morris, and the exhibition by the Rivers of Birmingham is a chronological approach to my documentation of Black lives in Birmingham in general, but Hansworth more specifically. I shall be taking you through 100 of these photographs and just having a bit of conversation about, you know, my engagement with it and perhaps some aspects of my life during the process. Just to say that I was one of the many young kids left behind in Jamaica when my parents decided to come to England. This is for those who can multitask. My mother came here first in 1956. And I lived with my grandmother, as many other youngsters did, while their parents came to improve their life chances. And I lived with an aunt when my grandparents reluctantly came in 1965, and 1960, and I later joined them in 1965. I was 14 and a half, thereabout, nearly 15 years at the time. And for me, what was interesting about my time in Jamaica was the absence of the people who were close relatives and friends. I had aunts and uncles, and we live in an extended family where, you know, you felt quite comfortable, but nonetheless, not seeing your close family, it was quite difficult for some time. So for me, there were plenty of questions being raised about where they were, you know, why they were, and what was life like here. So when it was my time to arrive here, I decided, you know, by then I'd formulated a lot of questions about life in Britain. And when I came here, my parents had a shop in Grove Lane, Hansworth, and it was an excellent opportunity to meet people, to see them firsthand, and to ask and talk with them. But unfortunately, while I think we all have a story to tell, not all of us are storytellers, so it was quite difficult. I think a lot of people over the years from, you know, especially from Jamaica, but I'd say from rural Jamaica, your emotions are not really something you wear on your shirt sleeves. I think it's probably the same with working class people wherever, but whenever you ask them, how are you doing or whatever, they'll say, all right. And I say, how are you really doing? They say, I'm really all right. You know, they really go into any details. So it was difficult to get the information I wanted. I couldn't see any photographs, but what I kept seeing were very negative images and representation of Black people in the press and in general, much the same as we see some pretty awful things today. And so I thought to myself that I was in an excellent position, you know, at the time to be able to use my craft, which I was developing at the time, to document our lives and presence as we struggle to establish ourselves here. So I set about teaching myself photography, and later on, you know, eased into taking photographs. In fact, I don't think I refer to it as documenting. I just felt the need to photograph all of our, you know, our experience. It wasn't until later on that, you know, I became a documentary photographer. Well, I was called one, and later on I was called an artist and many other things. So this is, if you imagine, this is a multi-lodging house. This would be in the 60s, and it's a house where a room would be let to a family or to, you know, a single person, but sometimes a family. And, you know, pretty well everything would be in the room. You see the television, and on the dressing table there, you see all the paraphernalia. And, you know, you sometimes find teapots in there and things like that. The cup rack on top of the television, the linoleum, and all of that. So it was that environment that, you know, a lot of these youngsters were, and the parents were hoping, if you like, to do the best for their children, and likewise hoping that their children would. Suffice to say, it wasn't always the case, because they met an abundance of racism in their travels. Here are a couple of guys at a party, 1969. I particularly like this one. They've got elements of rural Jamaica there. You can see the paraffin lamp in the top right-hand corner, and also a pair of Wellington boots, which we refer to as water boots there. And, you know, a couple of dapper-looking men, they used to dress in those days. Here, a young lad coming from Sunday school in, you know, in his side street next to his home, really. I was always quite interested in how I place and where I place the individual within the photograph, and I'm quite particular that whoever sees the photograph should somehow be able to recognize the location, not specifically, but for example, the culture in terms of England or wherever the photographs were taken. I mean, you couldn't look at this and say it's Jamaican, you know, it's more likely to be Europe, and obviously in this case, British. A group of youngsters on the shelter for the bin, and they jumped up there and they were pretending to be the Supremes. And I would really walk around and try and find interesting things happening on the street sometimes, and then photograph them. Because I didn't have a mentor in those days, what I did, I decided that a friend of mine in Jamaica who I used to have conversation with about life in England, I decided I would use him, you know, as a person to tell the story of Britain too. So I decided I would break it down into different headings. So there was politics, there was religions, social, education, and so on. And I tried to take photographs under those headings. And then I came upon this young man in Hansworth Park. He was, I mean, it was one Saturday after my chores, which all, you know, West Indian kids had to do. By then I'd been developing my photography, as I said, and I went to, just walking around the Arex, saw this young guy with his bicycle riding and the little dog running behind him, and I thought, wow. At the time we were struggling, as is now really, with the whole subject of identity, belonging, culture, and you know, and all of that. And here's this young lad with a Union Jack riding in the park so boldly, and you know, it was bold because at the time, you know, there were a lot of, you know, people weren't really happy with their lots. You know, there was a lot of racism that was meeting out to them in education and health and prison services and all the rest of it. So imagine all of that discussed with the society around you, and then this young lad is wrapped himself, if you like, in the Union Jack. And I thought, what a brave young man. So I took a few photographs of him riding his bike, and then I asked him to pose for this photograph. And I think it's the only one I took, but I was quite conscious that the horizon on the flag, the middle of the flag, should be on the horizon of the land, and also that where both the horizon and the path meet, it should be behind his head, just sort of focusing, you know, the attention on him a little bit more. This has gone on to become one of my most popular photographs and has been used quite extensively. David Lammy used it in his inaugural speech when he was Minister of Culture, and he's recently used it in his book Jacket. It was used in the BBC film Small Axe recently, and it's been written about and used on many book covers and other places. Having spoken to him, David Lammy also chose this as his favorite photograph in The Guardian, and I think Newsnight, for some unknown reason, I remember we did a piece where we had to go back and interview Winford, and he said that he had made the bike himself from bits of bikes he'd found around the place, and he went to the shop to find something to decorate it. And he had the option of choosing a windmill or the flag, and he chose the flag. You know, it was as innocent as that. He didn't choose it for any reason, and he didn't find any reason not to choose the flag either, because that was the flag he knew and the flag that he grew up under. So that was it. And here we have three guys standing outside a church. They were getting ready. They were readying themselves for a funeral which was taking place inside the building. Cannon Hill Park. What you find with in a lot of cases, for example, this one here, coming back to it, the building has since been demolished and a new building has replaced it. This is on Lozhouse Road in Hansworth. And also, while I'm very much involved, or should I say in contact with a lot of the people, in some cases, you know, it's no longer possible. People have emigrated or died. The two gentlemen on the right-hand side, one I haven't seen for years. The middle one, I think, is emigrated, and the other one has died. Neville on the left, I see him from time to time. And he tells me that he was traveling in the airport, and someone came up to him and reminded him that they had seen him in a book, a photograph. So there's a certain amount of notoriety that is attached to some of the individuals who appeared in it. This is Belrose in Cannon Hill Park. There were a lot of demonstrations in those days. This one in Birmingham was against police harassment, and here they're carrying a banner with a flag. If we must die, it's Afro-Caribbean self-help organization. If we must die, let it not be like hogs, which is a line from Claude McKay's poem, which apparently was also Shakespeare's favorite. Not Shakespeare, I'm talking about. Which was also Churchill's favorite poem. And again, what you find is the relationship with the photographs are constantly changing. They're not, you know, if you buy a book of photographs, these people are abstract. You don't bear any relation to them, but having them around me from time to time, or their offspring, you know, there's this constant feedback about what's happening. And the young man on the left who's holding his hand out with a flag, not the one with his fist raised, the other one, his daughter saw me and told me that, you know, they weren't having a good relationship after they saw this photograph, and, you know, and talked about it within their relationship with their father has changed tremendously. This is Bunfire, I think it was, in Hansworth Park. This is our, you know, summer holidays. It was pretty much a working class thing, but as in the Black community, it was, you know, the way by which, you know, you get a break from the inner cities, which is going to the seaside. You hire a coach, a 52-seat, 55-seater coach, and you know, put some curry goat and rice and peas in the boot of the coach, and you travel there, you enjoy the day, and then have the meal when you're coming back at a party. But so unfortunately, sometimes the sun got too hot and the meat just didn't, last the journey. But to have these youngsters, if you like, in this space, having such fun, just ignoring and forgetting all the woes that they encounter from day to day was, quite pleasant to see. This is on the coach. I think, I can't remember if it's just leaving or if it's, I think they're leaving. I think some people are coming off. This is Professor Stuart Hall at, he was then at Birmingham University, well worth finding out a little bit about him, cultural theorist. He died recently, but he's left a legacy worth probing. Robert Ralph was a white guy who decided to sell his house to a white family only, and he was thrown in Winson Green prison as a result of that. And then the National Front came out in support, and the anti-Nazi came out, against that. And the police were in the middle, and you can see they raided. They weren't prepared really. They raided the back gardens, and confiscated people's dustbins, which they used as shields. And as you can, for me, I was a little bit disappointed. They didn't put them back when they finished with them. They just left them. Jeffrey Morgan Loves White Girl. This was used as part of a record, well, not as part, this was used as a record sleeve for UB40. I can't remember what year the music was played, but they had also planned to write a song about Jeffrey Morgan, but I don't think that happened. And African Liberation Day is an event which takes place every year, but in a different, a highly populated, well, in a British city with a high population of African Caribbean people. And it is by way of, coming together, having rallies, rally on the street where they voice their concern about, their condition and how they find themselves. And there's a rally in the park, which you'll see a little bit later on, where they hear speakers from around the country and from abroad. And it's an occasion where people meet. There are a lot of cultural activities, there's book selling, and all of that. The three guys up front would normally ride their bikes ahead of the crowd, and sometimes check the side streets to see if there were police vans, as they would normally be parked in the streets along the journey in some cases. So yeah, I refer to them as the Outriders, and I'm still in touch with these guys, or if not in touch with them, then I hear stories about them from relatives or people who are in touch with them. Inspector Webb on the same march. The sign on the right reads, "Stop all state harassment." The same march, and I kind of refer to this one. I don't really give titles to photographs, but some of them lend themselves to title, and I refer to this one as a long march, simply because the concerns voiced that you can see on the placards that are being held, they've been long stated concerns of the people who are holding them, and they continue today. The banners might change, but the suffering and the racism continue, as we've seen with Black Lives Matter recently. This is Hansworth Park, Africa Liberation Day celebration, and there weren't any white folks in the park on this occasion, and the BBC also used this photograph for a program. It wasn't a program. Was it a program? Anyway, they used this, I can't remember now. It must be a program if it's the BBC. But what happened, yeah, it was a radio program, Radio 4, and what happened, we identified a number of people who were in the photograph, and we then interviewed them and, played the music, played that material, formed a radio program. Sorry about that. Again, this is one of the, again, quite popular photograph. These are a couple of young men, adjusting for position in front of the camera. And interestingly, some of these guys told me that, their lifestyle changed as a result of seeing the photographs I took, of them. And some also now tells me that they download some of the photographs from the internet and they use it to have a discussion about their past, when they get together. I think they try to organize a meetup every month or so. And it's quite good to see that they're using these photographs as reference as well. This is what's called a blues. I'm not quite sure if you guys in Telford and Bournville are aware of what a blues is. It's a party that does anyone know about the blues? No. What happens? It's a party that takes place after the clubs are finished. So you have the pubs, then you go to the clubs, and when that's finished, you go to the blues. And it's a party that normally takes place. On this occasion, it's in Digbeth, in the Institute, but it's sometimes in a house, in a flat, and the speakers are like double wardrobe speakers, with 1,000-watt amplifiers and so on. And I remember reading an article in the Times, Sunday Times magazine once, and it says you don't really dance at one of these parties, you just stand around, and the music, the vibration just shuffles you around the floor. So anyway, all of this is really if you like, a part of the route that reggae took to establish itself here. Initially, it would be the radiogram that you play to entertain your family and friends because people weren't being allowed or accepted into pubs and clubs. At the time I've been told rather that in some cases there will be a certain amount of glasses allocated for people from the Black community, like 12 glasses. If there are 13 of you, then the other will have to wait until someone's drunk, or they'll break the glass after you finish drinking from it. So what these guys would do, they'd all go down and they'd all buy a drink. And rather than waiting for the landlord to break the glass, they would break them themselves and buy another drink and keep breaking them until they found that he couldn't sustain that. So they let them in. So yeah, this is the blues. Here is James Hunt, was a local councillor, and as you can see from the suit and the shoes, he's quite, stylish man. And what I love about this is those little Honda cars, because I remember when they started coming, out, it was quite interesting. No, they're not Honda. What were they called? Can't remember what they're called. Datsun, I think. Anyway, what I try to do in these photographs as well is to capture the environment around. So it's, outside shot. I like the idea of including the architecture as well, so you can place the photographs fairly well. It's England, it's, likely to be an inner city area and so on. This is when this is when the National Front decided to have a meeting at one of the local school halls. It was part of a local election that was taking place, and the anti-Nazi came out, as you can see on the wall. Smash the Hitlerites. National Front is there. This is Bolton Road School in Hansworth. This is in, I think this is more towards Hallam Rock area, where the Asian community primarily had a demonstration against deportation, amongst other grievances they had. It was well supported, and it turned out, as you can see, there were many banners from different Asian organizations, the Bangladeshi, Kashmiri, Indian Workers Association, and so on. Dave Butcher is a local young man who would help to provide support for many of the youngsters, mainly young Black men, housing and other things. What was happening at the time, you'd find that a lot of these youngsters were almost in no man's land. They weren't really believed by their parents, and they weren't believed by the society around them. Their parents wouldn't believe if they came home and said, well, look, I'm being, abused at school. By that I mean racism, or being thrown out of school, being called names and all of that sort of thing. And on the other hand, they wouldn't be believed by society in general. Why they wouldn't be believed by the parents? Because the parents believe, well, where they come from, the police and teachers are, are pretty well respected. So if a teacher, if you can't get on with a teacher, then something must be wrong with you. It wasn't until much later on that a lot of them found out that, their kids were telling the truth and they were being victimized and abused in many cases. This young man is perhaps a representative of that abuse. I mean, he represents, this was taken outside the courthouse in Birmingham. He was alleged to have stolen an ashtray and he was knocked about by the police and he was ordered to, this is from a nightclub, and took his court appearance here, and I took a photograph of him. And the way I framed the photograph really is to have the full weight of the law on his shoulders. It's a case of not being able to escape. It will follow him around this legal system. And interacting with other cultural group, we find here's an Asian shop on Soho Road and a group of people buying, and the general scene in the high street. My idea with taking the photographs was to document their life so that our future generation will have as much material as is necessary for them, to move forward, and not to have to keep coming back to find little scraps of information that they need. And as well as taking the photographs, what I did is I collect ephemera, so I have a pretty substantial archive at Birmingham Library, and also my flat is full. And the idea there again is to provide material which will stimulate conversation about lived experience. Mrs. Walker, in her hairdressing shop or salon, she would be working in the week, and then weekends and so on, she would do hair, by way of making some extra cash. Most of the people who came here initially came for 5 years. That was the duration of the passport, and they felt that they could improve their lot in 5 years and return. But of course, once you start having a family and settling down, then you're no longer in control of of those plans, and a lot of people remain here. She, however, returned at some point and has since died. The woman in the top right-hand corner there is my mother. The only photograph of her in the photographs, or family, well, no, her. This is demonstration, anti-Nazi demonstration in city centre. I'm, as well as the crowd, I'm kind of quite interested in looking at the name of the shops, Timpson's and Manfields, and so on. Who would believe that we wouldn't have these names around? And as you can see, everything is so constantly changing even today. The same demonstration on its way through the Bull Ring to Digbeth, where the National Front were meeting at the Institute. This is the same place where the Blues photograph was taken. And the police came out to prevent any confrontation, and yeah, I mean, what I would do on many of these occasions to take a photograph, I was quite good at climbing, so I would climb on street furnitures, if necessary, try to get up on bus stops, or on the roof of my car is quite a popular place to be as well. Riot Shields, Digbeth. Yeah. This is a bridesmaid at a wedding. Some of these photographs, and you never know really which one. This one was used in a Black British style exhibition, which took place at the V&A. This photograph is I just recognize Mr. Kelly there. This
Sorry,
photograph,
I'm late.
was quite all right. This photograph is also of summer schools, and summer schools were very important. It was by way of us, teaching our kids, reading, writing, arithmetic, and also their culture. They were, we were deemed as people who had not contributed anything to civilization, not British or any civil, but to civilization. And imagine hearing this all your life. We didn't have the internet to check facts, check things on. We didn't have access to a lot of the books. A lot of the artifacts that we could reference weren't in our community. They were in museums and so on. So access was very difficult. And somehow we wouldn't even believe the people in our community who said that, these achievements were attributed to us, simply because we've been told that we've been so worthless, if you like, for so long that you almost believe it. It's almost like you had to, if a white person says it, it's fine. But as a black person, we are likely to make it up simply because we're desperate to have said we achieved something. But what these places do, these Saturday schools and other summer schools do, they really taught us, about our culture, amongst other things. And they really take care of these kids in the weekends and on summer holidays, so it allowed the parents to go to work and go to, enjoy themselves. On these occasions, these kids will also be taken to outings, to museums and seaside and other places of interest. Very important part of, our education system, the supplementary education. They were staffed by qualified teachers who gave their time freely to do this. 9 nights, the 9th night after the death, it's assumed that the spirit leaves the body, and on that occasion you have a 9-night. Prior to that, you have what's called a setup, and this is where people come and comfort the grieving family by sitting with them and consoling them, sharing with them, and so on. But on this occasion, the guys were singing in the front room. They were singing from the Bible. It's a mourn, really, so the songs are not really sung like recognizable songs. They're mourn, they're just drawn out. In the back room, you might find, the deceased relative being comforted. There's someone's cooking in the kitchen, dominoes being played in another room, and the children, and so on. And this goes on, from the moment the person died until burial, and then it eases off, and it sort of goes back to normal. But over that period of time, you still have visitors, people coming to visit, and they carry food and drinks and so on. I mean, it was my intention really when documenting these, I was aware that this experience would die out quite soon, because a lot of these guys were getting old and not all of them wanted to, were able really to be doing this. But what has transpired now is the next generation, they haven't taken on this method of mourning. They're more using drums, African drums, and so on in the process. This is a young woman at from a House of Dread Rasta house, and I would ask people permission to come and spend a bit of time with them, talking to them, and then take some photographs of them in their space. Like the education and so on, racism, reared its head in every possible corner you could find, and including the church. A lot of people who came here would talk about their time in England here, going to churches and being told, by the vicar or some representative that, they would prefer if they didn't come in the day, could they come into the evening service, or, basically not being welcomed in churches. There are stories of people going to buy houses. If, for example, I wanted to come and live beside you in Bournville, what would happen? They might say, well, look, don't go to this is the estate agent. Don't go, but don't look at your house in the day. Go in the evening, because if the neighbors see you looking at the house in the day, they'll be, you're not going to get it. There'll be some problem about that. So, in every aspect of your life, you'd come up against, racism. So it became a sort of a norm for us. This is a group of youngsters in Hansworth Park. Again, with them, the alternative music, you know, scene was developed because of them. You know, they couldn't go to, they weren't encouraged to go to clubs. You know, if you had a hat like that, you wouldn't be let in a club. You were vetted, you were turned away, you were, you know, were referred to it at the time as color bar. You know, we all know which club we couldn't get in and which place we couldn't, you know, approach for, you know, to hire the space or whatever. But these youngsters, they developed the music system, you know, the blues. They would make their own turntables and speakers and carry it around with them and provide music, which you know has developed today to, you know, a big industry, which, you know, has evolved into you know, people like Stormzy and others who, you know, are really standing in the footprints of these guys. This was West Indian Federation in Winson Green, and here Lloyd Blake at the time was managing the centre, and he was having difficulty raising some funds to renovate the building, which was really well used, as you can see here, but was in a dilapidated state, as you can see from the ceiling where water was coming through when it rains. And he asked me to take a series of photographs for him, and this is one of them. I think he went on to get the grant he required for the place as a result. Again, the same building. The same building again. I mean, what it did, it provides spaces for people who otherwise couldn't afford or couldn't find space to practice as a band or to have music events. You know, there were games and there were other social events and community events taking place there as well. You know, meetings and the like. This is the photograph I described as the kids are in no man's land. You know, they're sitting on a seesaw, and if you like, they're bouncing between, you know, the world. They're never really stable in their own community because they're not believed by one, you know, by their parents, and they're not believed by the environment they live in. And so I was quite pleased when I saw them, and even more pleased that they didn't respond to me taking the photograph. Otherwise I wouldn't have had, you know, this photograph. This is in Hansworth Park, way before the, you know, the swimming center, the swimming pool was built in the park and so on. 1985, 1980s we saw the rounds of disturbances around the country, Liverpool, Bristol, London, Birmingham was 1985, others I think were 81. And this is a combination of harassment by the police, you know, in particular against young Black men, and you know, it resulted in the streets getting damaged, as you can see, burnt out. Buildings were burnt, and people died in the process. Arrest the man. What would happen from time to time? We again, you know, we weren't being encouraged to use theaters. You know, if we wanted entertainment, you know, whether it be the blues or theater or poetry, we had to provide the space as well. You know, it's not always that you were allowed, or, you know, you'd be encouraged to go in a club or to hire a theater to put something on. So what would happen on occasion when events are taking place, Africa Liberation Day, Marcus Garvey celebration, or things like that, they're events that takes place, and you'd get people like Wesley Johnson on this occasion would come and, you know, recite their poetry or readings, or, you know, other activities would take place. Cas Phillips, he's now a professor at Harvard University. The churches, the Pentecostal church is very lively, very vibrant, you know, a wonderful place to be really. And I would recommend that all you guys find time to go to a church. They will let you in. They won't baptize you, not unless you want to be baptized, but you know, these places are not hidden. They're all of ours, and they would welcome you in very much. Just, you know, ladies, just put your hats on one Sunday and walk in. You know, they'll give you a Bible and they will find your seat. You know, they're not necessarily going to convert you on the first occasion, you know, but if you keep coming back, then of course they will, you know, try to make sure your soul is not lost. Gentlemen, the same, you don't need a hat, just walk in. And I encourage people, you know, we talk about this environment, and for me, this is about engaging with other people who probably are not familiar with these things I'm talking about, but it's not really a million miles from where you are, and, you know, it's perfectly okay to go to these. Vasaki is another one that takes place on the streets. The carnival is one that takes place on the streets when it happens. You know, just turn up at these places, meet people, you know, and share with them. I mean, I think especially important, you know, as we're talking about refugees, because these people that I'm documenting, you know, African Caribbean people, they're, you know, people who've constantly been searching for their human rights, really, and at all levels, you know, whether it be in the prison, in the churches, in the wherever they are, they just really require to be just left alone to live and to do their lot. So go and see them. Muhammad Ali, when he came to Birmingham to open the Muhammad Ali Center, here he was taken to Rusty Lee's restaurant. And I was never really on the A list of any of these events, which sometimes work quite well, because I think had I been, I might have been in the crowd where I wouldn't be able to take a photograph properly. But on this occasion, I was standing on top of my car, Morris Minor, to take this photograph. Local pub, Ivy House, Soho Road. And this is Acapulco cafeteria. And I said to the guy, it wasn't always, you can't assume because I'm black and I'm photographing the black community, it was always easy. It was never really that easy to do, because a lot of people really don't like to be photographed. One, they don't know what I'm going to do with the photographs and so on. And on this occasion, I said to Chris, the owner, do you mind if I take some photographs inside the cafeteria? And he said, it's your camera, it's your life. Anyway, I proceeded to take some photographs, and on my way out, this young man came and he pointed his finger in my face. You know, it was so close, it was almost as if it was penetrating my skin. You know, do I look at him? You know, am I challenging him? I mean, if I look down, am I being a coward? And it's amazing, you know, David Attenborough came to mind immediately. You know, so how you approach, you know, try not to look that you want to pick a fight, but at the same time not wanting to look too submissive that you're weak and all of that. So for some time afterwards, I made sure he wasn't in my horizon whenever I went out on the street taking photographs, really. Again, I walked in a pub, walking around the street with a camera and, you know, just checking out, see what's going on, meeting people, talking to them and so on. And I went in this pub and I came across this group of people who are playing dominoes, and I managed to take a photograph of it, which you know, for me works very well. Some children on the streets. I'm kind of interested in relationships that are made at this tender age, you know, and a lot of times they forget them. You know, we have our best friends, you know, when we're 10, 11, but we forget who they were, their names when, you know, we get older. And this idea of capturing some of these, you know, some of these connections, again, are quite good. I enjoy doing that. You know, winning the lost at any cost. This is where the church move out to the street once a year. I don't think they do so very much now because they're more an elderly congregation. This is Austin Road Church in Hansworth, and they basically go out in the street and they try to invite people to come and join their church. This is an occasion when Letitia Shakespeare and Charlene Ellis, after their death, their murder, and the space which was occupied by the police for some time, it was handed back to the family and the community. And, you know, there was a big, I wouldn't call it a rally, but there's a gathering, people gathered there and they lit candle, you know, in honor of those that had died, and, you know, just feel the need to be together, really. It was a quite traumatic event in the community. The boy with the flag you saw earlier on, this is him in the middle here. and his wife and his brother-in-law at the funeral of his son who was shot. Yeah, I'm still in touch with him. His mother died not so long ago. I wasn't able to do the funeral. This is one of the many events that takes place in Hansworth Park. The park really is a little bit like the front room of the community. Whatever event can't take place in your front room or in your back garden, you know, it's normally in the park. So we have things like the Carnival, Marcus Garvey celebration, other, you know, large event, cricket. We have an annual cricket competition that takes place there. And again, that's well worth. Saturday morning, Saturday morning, you can go and watch the practice. Sunday, you can go and watch the match. Hansworth Park, you're all invited. Choose a nice day, take your picnic, go and sit down in the park and watch the cricket. Well worth it. It's a proper little English village, you know, when it comes to the cricket there. You know, the whites and everything. It's you know, it's no mucking around. It's good stuff. But anyway, the park is a place where these events takes place, and this is one such. 2005, it was alleged that this young girl was raped in a shop by a group of Asians, and as a result, the information was broadcast on a pirate radio station, and subsequently, you know, the whole community was in uproar, as you can imagine. That, you know, they imagine that such a thing could happen to one of their own, and it could be their children and so on. So there was a lot of, you know, to and throwing and debate and things that was going on around this. And this is one of the rallies that take place. There's another photograph which is coming up. And but I have to say, you know, there was never any proof of any event having, you know, as described, taking place. This is outside the shop where it was alleged to have happened in Perry Bar. These are a couple of youths who were throwing stones at the police. And interestingly, the black guy in the middle with the high-vis jacket, he was trying to stop them from throwing the stones at the police. He was protecting the police, you know, which became an interesting scenario. The day afterwards, a couple of lads, I think the relationship between the African and the Asian community, you know, suffered somewhat there. There was also an event where a young black lad was set upon by a group of Asians and was, you know, was killed as part of the same disturbance that took place there. The day after the event, a couple of kids, the black kid and his Indian friend, were going to do their paper round, and it was quite, you know, hopeful to see that they were still together after the night of so much tension. The military, here we have a couple of guys in the military, you know, African Caribbean, you know, from we were West Indians, and before, you know, I've always been serving in British wars, you know, including the First and Second World War, and I think other campaigns as well. And here we have two modern guys who spend a considerable amount of their time, you know, in the military, one in the RAF and the Army. Pan-African Congress, as part of African Liberation Day, you know, we'd have people from, you know, different countries and different, you know, parts of this country coming to talk to us about their plight. You have to understand, as you could see from some of the posters in the earlier photograph, what was happening in Mozambique, in Guinea-Bissau, in South Africa, Rhodesia, Zimbabwe, you know, Zimbabwe, Rhodesia, Angola, and so on. What was happening there was as much of concern to us as what was happening in the States during, you know, the civil rights movement and so on. So it wasn't, we weren't isolated because we felt we were being attacked on all fronts, so we needed information. It wasn't always possible to believe, you know, the general press information that we were receiving. So it was quite important to get, you know, to speak to someone who had been through some of these experiences. One of the few occasions where Asians and African Caribbean people unite publicly, and this is the Easter parade on Soho Road, where a number of Black-led churches and Asian churches meet for a march down Soho Road, where they find a place where they stop and have a sing-song. I refer to this as the boys from the north, and I'll introduce you to the boys from the south later on. Dr. Robert Bedford. Again, you know, well worth looking up. His theology mainly was primarily at Birmingham University, but I think he went on to Open University and amongst other places. I know he does some work at BCU at the moment, and I'm sure at other universities as well. He's quite well known for his television programs, one of which was Is Christ Black? Namsa and her friend Simone, it's interesting watching these two young women grow up, really. In a sense of age of 16, and you know, I still know them very much, and it's amazing. The photograph remained the same, but the story and my relationship with the photograph changed, not just with this one, but you know, with a lot of them, because I no longer, they're not separate from me. I'm watching the individuals in the photograph grow and watching them change and so on. So it's quite a privilege, if you like, to be able to witness the changes that are taking place in individuals and in members of the community. The Golden Age Club, as well as supplementary education and so on, you know, we do care about our elders as well, and there are quite a few of these places for pensioners to spend their time in the day. And on these occasions, they're, you know, advised on money matters and health and, you know, outings and other things. This is a bashment, which is a more modern version of the blues. So you know, as you can imagine, the genre of music changes as we move on. You know, we were reggae, and now we have, you know, garage and jungle and all of that sort of thing. And here, these kids were at a bashment. I did ask if I could come along and take some photographs, and they said yes. What time will you be opening? They said about 11:30. I really, not having been to a club for many years, forgot the etiquette of club one. You don't turn up on time, which I did, and only to find they didn't really get there until about 2:30 in the morning. But it was by then I was a little bit tired, but you know, you picked up once the music started. And here, you know, unlike the days are, I was gonna say my days, but I might say your days, you know, when you used to dance with a handbag in the middle of the floor and you know, a group of you here, these guys, they had a bottle of Hennessy and 4 cans of Red Bull in the middle of the floor, they're dancing around. These are the guys from the south side of the city. A group of young men play Ludo in, you know, in their friends. It's like a shebeen, really, and it's a space where there are very few spaces at the moment where these guys can come and sit down and enjoy themselves. The pub are no longer, the pubs are all closing, and a lot of the places they would meet are either get raided or targeted by the police. So on this occasion, it's just a Ludo game in front of an open door, and this is where they can come and get some soup and some food to eat and so on, and refresh themselves, sit down and have a chat and a game and so on. A young man at a funeral. Interestingly, and the perception is a lot in some cases, and the perception of him, you know, he's a hard man. You know, he's got the hat on, he's got a chain around his neck, and he's got all of these rings on his fingers like knuckle dusters. But then I remember when having this photograph in a gallery where people are able to see it, and you can see the badge that he's got on him, which is I think his cancer research or something. Immediately, a lot of people's reaction to this man changes. Because, you know, if he's supporting cancer research, it can't be all that bad. You know, perhaps those things are not really knuckle dusters. You know, perhaps he's innocent. You know, not guilty as first thought. This is David Hines from Steel Pulse. He was at the Hockley flyover event organized by Stuart. From time to time at church conventions, they you know, there's a lot of food, a lot of entertainment, and all the kids are looked after as well. And here we see the kids are sitting down for a meal. Funerals. This is one of the many funerals of these young men, you know, were shot in the city, and this one, you know, I was quite interested in how funerals are changing, because I realized that a lot of them are changing in some places, because a lot of the kids don't go to church and they don't know the songs that are saying, and you know, if they don't have the sheet with the songs on, then it becomes you know, it's not, you find only a certain group of people singing, but what they still do is they will fill the grave in themselves, and this is one of the last honor that you can do, to perform for a friend, a lost friend. Really, we don't use the digger to fill the earth in. You know, people are muddied. You can see, you know, they've been through, and this is normally the preserve of men, but now quite a few women are doing this. And again, you know, the older generation, if the person was a drinker, would go to the pub and so on, they'd pour libation more often than not in those occasions. But these youngsters, what they did is they got a bottle of champagne and they emptied it in. The older generation would pour a tip of rum, white rum, in the grave, but these guys, they got a bottle of champagne and they emptied it in the grave. That's another photograph of it. Your Lost Eye chose this one. These are guys who, you know, started their own business. There's one who's a market stall holder, and these guys had set up a polishing company, you know, in the Hockley area of the city. You know, the Suslow played a big part in our youngsters' life. It blighted a lot of them, you know, their lives. You know, they're taken in, you know, taken to police station, knocked about. They sometimes end up in mental institutions, sometimes all sort of, you know, it has all sort of effects on them. On this occasion, the background is Versace and Hansworth. And these two police had seen this young man standing at the bus stop, and they chose to approach him. Why, I have no idea, but he refused to speak to them. Instead, he just opened his phone and gave it to them, and they wouldn't take the phone, and he wouldn't speak to them. I wasn't able to stay around to find out what happened. A group of musicians performing at the flyover show organized by Stuart. I refer to this as pop-up bookshop, and these are people who, this would be organized on an occasion where a large gathering of Black people would come together, like the Marcus Garvey celebration, like African Liberation Day, and any such event, and booksellers, guys who have shops that sell books, would pack all of this material in the back of a van and ship that material, to provide, reading material, suitable reading material, because again, the racism wasn't just state, it was commercial as well, capitalism, I mean, somehow you're okay, but we don't want your money. We're not going to sell your books, and whatever reasons they give. But these were really very well appreciated and well attended. They sold, I think, quite a few books on this occasion. This is a funeral, and a bit like the first photograph of the young lad who in the room with his broken car. Years later, imagine that this is his contribution, his marriage, his family. And I particularly like it because it reminds me of the foothills of the Blue Mountain, where I and some of these people in this photograph come from. The sound system, it got developed a little bit, as you can see here. This is just one, set of the speakers. There was another on the other side somewhere. And as you can imagine, the speakers that were taken in the house have changed a little bit since. This is the modern version. This is a guy known as Chicken George. He's a broadcaster. He's been for many years, and he's broadcasting many radio station. I was going to say reputable radio station, but it included the BBC. So I don't know if that still holds. But Chicken George is very well known and is dedicated. Himself, to broadcast and educating the Black community. I have to say he's blind as well. I don't know what as well, he's blind. And here we find a group of people jamming, Jode is from the Gambia, and you find the Jamaicans in amongst the crowd and different nationalities. So we find a group of, different people coming together to play music. Hansworth Park, again, these park benches, it gives you time, especially in the summer months, to get out, have some fresh air and to reflect on your life, as I imagine this gentleman is doing here. And it might be the bench you sit on when you go to the cricket match. This is one of the benches just by the cricket pitch in Hansworth Park. This is Pauline Black. You see, I tend to refer to people not by their names, but by, a description of them gender-wise. And I didn't really take names of people too much when I started taking the photographs, because it's one thing to be photographing these people, but then to have names, it's almost like you've got too much information and you could be accused of selling out to the police or to social services or so on. But I needed to be in their good books, if you like. I couldn't let that be seen as what was happening, nor did it happen. But it was, the criteria really was to document the lives and experience of people, so that future generations wouldn't have to go through the hassle of finding bits of their lives and cultures. Harvin Anderson, he's a local artist, very big local. He's no longer local. He's so big he can't hold in Hansworth. But his paintings, again, look him up. I mean, some of you guys might have some money now, you're retired, but I couldn't afford one of his paintings, let's put it that way. He's got a gallery in London and one in New York. And it's really nice to see local lads, you know, done well. He went to the local community centre, Weld, you know, and then later went on to university and you know, and has done very well for himself, as have many other people from the area, because it's generally seen that, you know, it's a damp area, no one comes out of there, you know, other than via prison and so on. You know, that's not the case, really. That's the perception that is, you know, given by the media in general. This is Barbara Walker, again, very, very well-known artist, and has worked, you know, internationally. I think she's done a piece of her work is, she does a lot of drawings on walls, and I think she's done a piece for the Facebook building in London when it was opened a couple of years ago. Beverly Lindsay speaking at the town hall. This is the occasion when, in 2011, when, you know, we had the riots where youngsters really were making demands on society, and as a result, in Dudley Road, you know, a car ran into a group of Asian men, and this is a subsequent gathering to support the family, and this is in Summerfield Park. And these are a couple of people at the event. And I have to say that's my 100 photographs. Thank you. Any questions?
Oh, thank you. That was absolutely fascinating.
You're welcome.
Very enjoyed
Pictures.
You are welcome.
And I went to the opening of the exhibition in the MAC.
Yes.
And which was quite fascinating, in the end wall, when there were lots of little pictures on.
Yes.
I sort of in the third or fourth row, as older people showed their children, their grandchildren, what they were looking like when they were younger.
Yeah.
And then somebody noticed that I was sort of at the back and said to me,
Okay.
Where's your picture here?
Yeah.
You know, I'm just visiting. And it was absolutely charming listening to this group of friends and relatives talk to one another, and obviously their extended families. But then they were quite dismayed that I didn't have a picture in the group. And it became a slightly celebratory look. We've got somebody just come to look at our pictures.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. When this first exhibition was at the MAC, I had one young man who, having seen some of the photographs, he was at the MAC for another event. That's when they had this bring and sell on a Sunday, and I was there, and he came to look at the photographs, and he was almost in tears. And I asked him, you know, what was so emotional about it, and it was a photograph around Acapulco. He says, oh, I remember that cafeteria. I used to go there when I was a child. I used to, you know, visit there, and these sort of activities, these sort of things went on there. And, you know, and he said never before did he think he would ever see his lifestyle represented in a gallery. Mm-hmm. But the strange thing is, you know, this guy wasn't a black guy, as he was a white guy. You know, and so there's this assumption that because you take photographs of black people, it's only about black people. It is not. It's about a shared experience.
Hello, can you see my hand raised?
I can see your hand raised.
Hello, I'm absolutely enthralled. I've known you on and off over the years by all sorts of means, but mainly through doing some drama work with the Black community years back. In Lozells,
okay,
and I used to go to the Drum, and I used to go to, you know, next door to Aston Hippodrome, and many a blues, and many an argument as well, many an argument about shebeens, because I said, it's Irish, it's a bloody Irish word, and of course it's Jamaican as well, you know, but, you know, and the reasons for it, the transmission of language and all that stuff. But really the other thing was you showed you showed two of the anti-Nazi marches through Birmingham. Well, I was on one of those. I was on the big one, in fact, that you mentioned, and I was glassed. I was a steward, and I had a glass thrown in my face, only cut an eyebrow. But you know what I saw when I was there? We had to go round the back, or round the front, but looked at the back rather, of the police station, which was then, you know, still operating, the Digbeth one. And we actually saw members of the National Front and others, sympathisers, shaking hands with the police there.
Yeah,
we saw it. We saw it.
Really?
Oh yes, really. Yeah, very really. Absolutely shocking. And you know what? Nobody took a photograph.
No, I didn't see it.
No, it happened.
You should have pulled your phone out and take a photograph.
No phones then.
Oh,
Didn't have mobiles.
No, no. The other thing I wanted to say, there were a number of things. Barbara Walker is superb, and of course I saw her stuff at the Mac as well as yours, and other places. And Pauline Black, of course, at the moment, she's featured at the Herbert. I've already booked my place, by the way, for the two-tone exhibition, and so on. She's going to be there.
In fact, I think she's on Question Time tonight.
She is. She's on Question Time. That will be repeated, of course, and you can get it on iPlayer. Yeah. And maybe the last thing is that I have got a connection, if you like, a kind of surrogate association with UB40, because I lived for 10 years with the dad, if you like, the father of UB40, who was a, you know, convinced socialist, humanist and everything. And he was the father of Ali and also Rob, and then later Dunk, of course it is now. And the whole of that UB40 thing, which meant a great deal, you know. Yeah. So I'm so pleased to be able to see all of your work, and again, and I've got your book already.
well, thank
marvelous,
you.
Marvelous book.
Well, thank you. I think you should organize a trip, you know.
Organize a blues.
A trip, organize. Well, I'll be the first. Invite me to your blues when you come.
Sure.
When you've done it, definitely. You know, you can invite everyone. Yeah. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
And it's nice to,
John, I had a question, if that's okay. Vanley, thank you for that. It was really interesting seeing all of the pieces individually. I just wondered sort of what your aim is in terms of taking the photographs. What's your thought process in terms of taking them?
Well, my initial thoughts was I needed to document the struggle of the African Caribbean people to establish themselves in this landscape. It hasn't been easy, and I thought, as I mentioned earlier on, we received very negative press in the early days. It was about disease-ridden, oversexed men who are here lazy, but at the same time they're here to take our jobs, and so on. We received very negative. If you get a copy, I think it's out of print at the moment, but if you're able to get a copy of the book by the Rivers of Birminam, at the back of it we have a collage of newspaper cutting from 1958, I think, or 1948 to 2011, and that will just give you an example as to, you know, what was written about us. And I was quite adamant that what I saw written there was not the life I was living, and I need to document the lives that I was living so future generation will be able to reflect on that and use it as they see fit. And so I didn't just photograph, I collected ephemera as well. And if I might just turn and share with you this one I have here. This is a hat worn by someone who came up of the Windrush. You know, I have hats, I have books, I have pamphlets, leaflet, magazines, I have the paraffin lamp. Anything that you know is able to trigger the story. For example, the paraffin lamp, which was so much a part of working class living, but much more so, you know, the Black community, I think, because we weren't experiencing this cold so much. And I remember just mentioning the paraffin lamp with a group of women. We were sitting down, and one said, oh, she loved the paraffin lamp because she liked the pattern it made in the ceiling when she was a child, when she's going to bed. Another one said she hated it because it made her clothes very smelly, especially when she then had to travel on the bus. You could smell it so much. And another said, well, she just despised it because through a fire it killed her sister. So it was just one object that we highlighted, and through that one object, so many stories, you know, were brought up and could have gone into. There are many other stories attached to this, and collecting the object is by way of collecting, you know, a stimulus for the conversation that can take place around them. And of course, things like posters are used for education and research, and there are other publications and things that pretty well everything I can get hold of, I will. And the idea is that we should house this material in a bit like the Schoenberg in New York, which is part of the New York Library, but it is housed in Harlem and run by people who are reflected in the archive. I think we should be custodian of that material. It is generally thought when an elephant crosses the bones of its ancestors, he picks it up and mulls over it and turn it around, look it around, turn it over a few times and carry on. I think all we are asking for is the ability to find a space where we can do that with some of our objects.
And do you think that narrative has changed? Like you're saying that there was an incredibly negative narrative when you were first taking photography, taking pictures. Do you think that narrative has
changed? It's changed tremendously. I mean, I am now, if I don't photograph someone, I'm asked why haven't I photographed or why haven't I used this photograph. I remember one session in Hansworth Park. We were having the carnival, and there's a barrier on either side, and I was inside the barrier, and I think that was reserved for the carnival queen and the dignitaries, and I was in there taking photograph. The young man who was head of security and walking in front of the carnival queen, you know, I asked him to move aside so I could take a photograph, and he came towards me and said, I shouldn't be here. I should, you know, come out, move out of this area, this private area. And the two lads who were carrying the carnival queen or helping, you know, they came in between myself and him, and you know, turned towards him and said, "Well, don't you know who he is?" So in a way, I have sort of a protective status at the moment. In some cases, and perhaps when it's least effective because I'm not able to jump over walls and take photographs like I used to, but it's changed tremendously. I mean, I meet people who say the only way they could tell their children their history is by referring to the photographs and the archives and things. So it's well respected and used.
John?
Yes, if I may. It's actually not me. I've got a question that's come in on chat from Nikki B, who you may remember, Vanley. Nikki says, thank you for sharing your work, Vanley. It was always wonderful to see. Apologies for joining the call late. There we go. You may have shared this already, but could you please share if you always have a camera with you when you're out and about, or are you quite deliberate when you're taking photographs?
I do walk with my camera all the while, although I have to say for some months I haven't taken it. But if I'm going out the door, it's a little bit like, I don't know if it's sexist to say that women going out of the house without their handbag, you know, it just doesn't really happen. And I feel kind of naked if I don't walk with my bag with my camera, although I rarely use it. There's just this thought that on the occasion that I don't carry it, I will be finding something that I want to photograph. But I do walk with my camera all the while.
Since I've got the mic, can I ask something? Because you mentioned about standing on your car to take the picture of Muhammad Ali. And I only realized this when somebody else said it in another occasion, another event, about how many of the photographs are taken from looking from a higher position down on the crowd and so on. How do you do that? How do you get ready for that? How do you is it just spontaneous? Or do you find a box or a car or something to jump onto? You must be very athletic, leaping about everywhere with the camera.
Yeah, I mean, I'm from the foothills of the Blue Mountain, you see, and we lived on the peak, so we have this, you know, this, you know, let's refer to it as a false sense of superiority. We look down on everyone else and everything, you know, is below us. There's nothing really above us apart from a bigger mountain sort of thing. So, and I was used to climbing trees a lot and things like that as a youngster, and that stood in good stead. You know, you can see if there's a crowd and you're looking straight across, you know, the same height as the people there, you're not going to go to get a, you know, a good representation of the crowd and what's happening. So you learn to climb, you know, on street furnitures, you know, and some of the, you know, the telephone bin boxes and whatever is there. You find, but there is a Vasaki that takes the same route every year, and I remember I would climb the gates of the old swimming baths in Grove Lane, you know, every year to take a photograph from that position, but unfortunately I can't climb it anymore. So that's instead what I do, I put the camera on a monopod and I use I use my phone as a triggering device. I can see the image on my phone and I can take the photograph that way. So I still get the height, but without the pain.
Wow. I mean, while I've got the mic, can I ask you my question? Well, one, God, I've got loads here. But anyway, I'll just have one. When you showed the picture of the lads on the Dodgems, and you talked about going to the seaside, I mean, when I was a kid, from our school, you used to have trips to the seaside, and that's you know, you talk about Birmingham or London or whatever being a place where, you know, there were black people and white people in National Front. What was it like turning up in Blackpool or Fleetwood or Morecambe as 30 or 50 or 20 or whatever it was number black kids going on a day out, while at the same time, people like me would have been turning up at the same time in another bus?
Well, I think there was sort of safety in numbers. You know, they felt quite comfortable. You know, I think that well, I personally didn't encounter any, nor did I hear much of any racism taking place there. I think, you know, the people who are running the rides and so on, they just want your money, really. You know, so
but is that crossover between? Is that crossover between what is black and white, and what is working class? Because what they had was all working class, which you mentioned several times.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, still today, the working classes do that. I mean, we have 3 buses, I think, go from Quinton the other year up to Blackpool for the day, just like that.
Excellent.
Yeah, they're still organised.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, go on.
I was just interested that I wondered, was it more difficult to take photographs of groups of young women, because a lot of your photographs show groups of young men out and about. Were the women not doing that as much?
There were some women who were out and about, but not as much. You know, I mean, if you speak to a lot of the women, what they will say to you, for example, the front room, they will say, well, I really didn't enjoy the front room because our chores was to dust all the paraphernalia in the front room, and there were a lot of them, you know, to iron the ruffles and so on. And you know, I think the Caribbean household, you know, we all had chores to do. We all had something to do in the house, and you know, we couldn't, and especially young women didn't really just go out, you know. But later on, you know, let's say conscious black women joined the organizations that sought our liberation as much as anyone else. I think it's just a foresight. It's just my editing was not as inclusive as it ought to be.
Thank you.
I thought especially at the beginning, with the contrast of the black and white photographs, was quite stunning. Do you ever take photographs in colour, Vanley?
I do, but I don't really show much in color as yet. I suppose at some time you might see some of them, but I do prefer to take photographs in black and white. It really doesn't give you all that unnecessary color to deal with. It gives you the structure, you know, the basic graphics of things for you to impose your, you know, your thoughts on.
So Tony Kelly's put a question on the chat line there. I don't know if Tony you want to say it, but if not, I'll read it out. And very interesting because Vanley touched on the fact that he collects stuff. Well, if ever you saw the stuff he collects, you'd faint. But there was the exhibition at the Icon recently. But for today, Tony says, having visited the Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C., dedicated to the memories of Black struggles in America, when are these artifacts, photos, etc., going to be put on display permanently for the public in a secure location? And I hasten to add, in Birmingham, not London.
I'm glad you said that, you know, man after my own heart. And hi, Tony, again. Yes, we were in conversation with, well, are in conversation with the museum and that gallery with regards to using one of their properties for, as the archive, to house the archive. With the pandemic, with COVID and all that's happening, it's really set us back somewhat, but we've done some extensive work with regards to visiting other places, you know, New York and other places around Britain to have a look at some of the models that are there. And yes, we have an idea of a building, and we're just waiting and hoping that it will happen within the near future. And obviously, we might need to call on your help at some time to do this.
You don't speak up here without being asked to get involved.
No. I mean, I have to say, he doesn't like to, you know, it doesn't like his, you know, I'm limited as to how many times I can call his name John Dolan, but, you know, he's been very supportive in the process as well. You know, as you probably know, he was former head of Birmingham Libraries.
I thought that was Tony. Never mind me.
Any more comments, questions?
First thing in the festival to make me cry.
What was
Right, well,
if I may, just coming back to the festival, you know, talking about human rights and so on, you know, the rights of many people have been, you know, really knocked about. You know, individuals have been brutalized, really. I mean, just, you know, remembering while I'm thinking here now, you know, a program we watched last night, which is about, you know, the miseducation of Black youth.
yeah.
And it's just incredible. Who would believe that we lived in a society where, you know, all seems so normal and we fight for the rights of others overseas as we see bloodshed, but, you know, those who are dying on your streets, you tend not to believe them, and everyone shouts, you know, lock them up, hang them, kill them, whatever you want with them. But they are human beings that has been mistreated, you know, that have been brutalized, misrepresented, and, you know, all the negatives you can think of. And, you know, they need support. Sometimes they just need conversation. You know, we don't bite, really. I just say, get out there and make a friend. That's my leaving message to you, for you guys this year. Every one of you, go and make a friend who's of a different race to you.
Yeah.
No
problem.
Yeah.
Very
What
good.
about that? We're all going to church in Hansworth Park. I mean, we want days for the next 6 months.
But I mean, here they are here. Just visit them. Just go out. You know, go as a group. If you don't trust yourself, if you think you might become a Christian if you go to the church, take your friend. You know, or you get a bus and just turn up at the church one day. Turn up at the Gurdwara one day. Turn up at the mosque one day. You know, they're here. They don't bite, really. You know, they're. You know, if you're doing the work that you're doing, then I think it's good to explore your community and find out what's going on.
Martin, Astrid, you're in charge. Get it sorted.
I've done it all my life.
Yeah.
Good. Well, then you should take the others or send them.
Yeah.
Claire,
Right.
Only
back to
told
you.
you want to say something.
Shall we close down now then?
I'm good.
Tony's got his hand up again. Sorry.
Oh,
Tony's
who's got their hand up?
Tony Kelly.
Tony.
Tony?
I was just going to say, the whole essence of what you've done over such a protracted period of time shows my camera never lies. And this is why I'm noticing, I've sort of looked at the people who are on this webinar, and we're all of an older generation. Younger people need to be able, the youngsters out there, need to be able to see this Vanley, see the history, the past, the present, the future. So that's why I'm all for it, with John Nolan and others like yourselves, having this as a permanent thing, because I know a lot of it is in your home and a lot of it is in safekeeping on storage. It has to be out there to see, for people to see the past, the present, the future. When you were given that camera as a present, I know the history so many years ago. Who would have thought we would be here speaking? But this is a small group. I want this to go global, this to go worldwide. As I go back to saying, having visited the Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C., it leaves you with a sense of, oh my gosh, this was what was happening in the 1930s and the 40s and so on and so on. You have an important part of history within all of this, and we must make it available so that people can get to see this.
Yeah.
That's my parting shot.
Thanks for your support.
Yes, yes. Right, well, we appreciate this evening, Vanley. It's been really interesting, really revelation.
Sorry, Claire. John Tort's got a question. I've got his hand up.
Oh, sorry, John.
Okay,
Last one out.
On what Tony was saying, Vanley, given that you're sort of in inverted commas getting older, what would you do to encourage younger people, say in Hansworth or Afro-Caribbean people across Birmingham, in terms of following on what you've done so that future history can continue to be recorded in the way that you have? Because it's obviously very much represents the sort of atmosphere of certainly the Hansworth area.
Yeah, I mean, I would say to all people, you know, both English, African, Caribbean, Asian, Vietnamese, Gambian, Polish, I recommend that they all take a part in documenting their history. It's not just the African Caribbean. You find that, you know, it could be, and I recommend, I say to everyone whenever I meet them, collect something, do something. If it's your mother's recipe, it might be, then, you know, do a recipe book. If it's your photographs you take, then edit. If you take so many photographs, at the end of every month, why don't you just edit the photographs to about 10 photographs? And at the end of 12 months, you will have, you know, what is 10 times 12? You know, 120 photographs. And then what you do, you might say, knock 10 off that, and you've got 100 photographs for that year. That's that year. And if you do that for 13, 20 years, you imagine what information you're passing on to your kids. You know, so it is important that us as a people participate in our own documentation, and not leaving it to historians who don't share the experience that we have. You know, and I would say that goes right across the board, irrespective of age. But in terms of the archive as well, I'm hoping that the archive, when it is placed somewhere more public, then its use alone will generate, you know, a greater need for the documentation and for others to donate materials that they might have in their own possessions.
But just throw in another. Nikki B, not Nikki Osborne, unfortunately can't put the sound on for reasons I won't go into. She says, I think I might be slightly younger than most of you on the call, like me. Picking up on just what Vanley has said about connecting with folk outside of your social circles. I mean, and I have to say, this is me now, not Nikki. I'll come back to Nikki. We've tweeted a buggery about this thing. We need help in Amnesty to get young people involved. I mean, there's lots of young people in Amnesty, but we need more. And so any ideas you have. However, back to Nikki's message, sorry. So connecting with folk outside of your social circles. I'm a Pakistani Muslim working in Brum, living in Solihull. If anyone wants to connect, please do let me know. Also happy to get involved, to get younger generations involved in sharing Vanley's work. Well, there we go. Amnesty groups around the city, Shropshire, Bournville, Sutton Coldfield, wherever. There's an invite from Nikki B, who I have contact details with. I know Nikki. There we go. There's an open invitation from Nikki to give us some support in doing what we're talking about here.
It's an interesting thing.
And Nikki means what she said. I know Nikki. She's brilliant. Claire.
And photograph collecting isn't what it used to be. Now we've got all this digital stuff, and I think that might be a bit of a worry. People instantly take photographs and look at them, and then what happens? They don't put them in an album or keep the photographs like you have done.
Yeah, but I think it's only because we haven't as yet developed a method of easily choosing and keeping our photographs. You know, like I said, you know, your camera stores your photographs by the month. So, you know, at the end of every month, just edit that photograph and download that material. At the end of every year, you can do a yearbook. You can print them off in a yearbook. You know, it's perfectly easy to do that. You can add to that material either by writing in the book or you know, get some pages, text to the page or things like that. There are all sort of ways, really. I think what we're basically saying, you know, we don't have this little piece of paper like we used to, and therefore we can't think of other ways of keeping these photographs. But, you know, that's a bit lazy. If you think they're worth keeping, you know, you'll find a way of keeping them. Edit them every month, I say. You know, if 12 is too much, then, you know, do 5 photographs that are important to you for that month and just keep them and, you know, store them somewhere. And at the end of it, you know, you'll have a wonderful record. But just someone cooking, you know, it could be, you know, your grandkids playing with you. It could be, you know, grandkids on the allotment. You know, it's just something that you have collated and you can pass it on to someone else. You know, and it's amazing how they love to share some of these little moments, because while we're living it, we're not really experiencing it. You know, it's good to be able to reflect on it, to sit back when you have time and to look back at these things.
Yes, well, lots to think about.
Lots, no, don't think. You best spend your whole life thinking, just do it.
Lots to talk about, lots to do.
Yes, lots to do, that's what I like, lots to think. Only artists have the privilege to think.
Well, thank you to everybody for coming.
Thank you.
And thank you to you, Vanley. It's been wonderful.
Thank you.
And I'm going to give you a clap because I'm unmuted.
Okay,
So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and thanks again. Speak soon, John.
Thank you. Yes. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
No.
Rest of the festival, still things going on. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, John.